hybrid meeting of the Cleaner Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The meeting is able to be viewed live by members of the press and public today. Therefore, may I welcome anyone that may be watching remotely. We do have one in the public gallery. A recording of this meeting will be made available on the Council's webcasting and YouTube channels after the meeting has concluded, should anyone else also wish to view it. To confirm, as a Council, we welcome the use of the Welsh language within our public meetings, but I can confirm that I have not received any notification or request to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. May I remind members to refrain from using the chat facility and instead use the raised hand icon to indicate when you wish to speak. Please could you also keep your microphone muted when you are not speaking so there aren't any interruptions. Could I also remind members that as per statutory guidance made under section 4 of the Local Government Wales Measure 2011 and our formally adopted hybrid meeting policy, any member attending a meeting remotely must be able to be seen and heard by the members and officers who are attending the meeting, as well as by members of the public viewing the meeting. So can I ask, please, that you use your cameras for the duration of the meeting? And we'll move on to the agenda. Could I check with Niall whether we've received any apologies for this meeting?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Councillors Stuart Ashley and Jason O'Connell.
Thank you very much. We'll ensure we record that. Item 2 on the agenda is the declarations of interest. So could I ask members in alphabetical order to state whether they have any declarations of interest to declare? So, Councillor Clarkson.
Just family buried at Panteg.
Right, okay. Councillor Evans.
Me want to declare an interest because I sit on Gwent Crematorium Committee and I'm involved with discussion with undertakers, so that may come into the conversation, so if I can declare that, please.
Thank you, that's very useful. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Haynes?
Just family members buried throughout Torfaen, nothing else that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Haller?
None that I'm aware of.
Thank you. I don't think Councillor James is with us. Councillor Parish?
None that I'm aware of, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And myself, again, none that I'm aware of, so I think that's fine. Okay, if we move on to item 3, which were the minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of September 2023, which is on page 3 of your reports pack. We received these minutes. Can I just ask if anybody has anything to raise in relation to these, or if not, I will take them as agreed. I see no hands, so I think we will take those as agreed. Thank you very much. So we move on then to the action sheet. And if I can pass on to Geraint in relation to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've the recommendations have gone out to officers, and Dan has come back to me with them. But there's one point of clarification that we just need to resolve before we can publish the final document and share with members.
Okay. All right, colleagues. So let's look out for that. Thank you. And then we move on then to item 5, which is the substantive item for this meeting, which starts on page 19 of your pack. And I welcome Daniel Morelli and his colleagues. I'm sure they'll do their introductions. Over to you to introduce the report, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So the purpose of this report is to provide members with the opportunity to discuss the Council's cemetery service and specifically to provide information on policies, service standards and costs, to allow members to consider opportunities, challenges and demands on the service, to comment on a proposed public consultation questionnaire and to make recommendations for improvements to the service having regard to the current financial climate. The first section of the report covers the background. So the background information of the report provides general details about burial practice in the UK. There's information on the law and guidance relating to cemeteries, emphasising that there is not a coherent body of legislation relating to burials or clear standards in respect of facilities, policies and procedures. It also important to note that broader legislation also applies to cemeteries, for example, the workplace health and safety requirements. There's information in this section relating to the cemetery service, specifically in Torfaen, including the number and type of cemeteries, and details relating to their opening times and closing times, facilities, advice and information provided to the public, management arrangements and staffing levels. Within the information and discussion section, you'll note that this covers the standards that the cemeteries seek to achieve and includes information about the Institute of Cemetery and Crematorium Management chartered for the bereaved and the standard that has been achieved by the Council, which is a bronze standard. The latest chartered for the bereaved assessment is included as an appendix in the report. There are details about policies and procedures in place within the cemetery service and specific reference to our practice related to the pre-purchase of graves, which is a very sensitive matter, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. The report also includes information about the cemetery's maintenance and how this is managed, and it is noted that the grass cutting is the most costly and problematic area of maintenance. This section also covers funerals and burials, including the number of burials over the last 10 years. The data shows that the number of burials is fairly static, and there is a specific reference to the service's role in carrying out public health funerals. The arrangements for maintaining graves, particularly where the soil sinks over time, is also included within this section of the report. There's information about record keeping and also recent work that's been undertaken to develop checklists to assist with monitoring conditions and identifying issues at cemeteries. The report within this section covers details on costs, including burial fees, and it's worth noting that these fees are set locally and have not changed since 2020. Fees do not fully cover the costs, which means that the council has to subsidise the service. Data is also provided on the number of complaints, inquiries and compliments received by the cemetery services, and members will note that the complaints have increased over the last year. There's a section on community involvement and the benefits that this can bring in helping with the upkeep of cemeteries. It explains the options that are being explored to establish Friends of Cemeteries groups and identifying local volunteers. There's a section also which covers a proposed consultation, which is intended to seek views and experiences of service users, the public and key stakeholders. A proposed questionnaire is included as an appendix in the report, which we are seeking feedback on at today's meeting. The report also outlines the risks of not effectively managing cemetery services and also details the next steps following scrutiny. And that concludes the summary of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I could welcome your colleagues. Perhaps I could ask them to introduce themselves so that members are aware who's here. Are you happy to do that? And I'd also welcome Councillor Mandy Owen, who's the executive member who is joining us as well today. So if you'd like to quickly introduce yourselves.
Good morning, members. My name is Louise Powell. I'm the interim manager for Environment and Street Scene.
Good morning, I'm Rebecca Davis. I'm the Cemeteries Manager.
Good morning, members. I'm Jo Lewis. I'm Lead Finance Officer for Economy and Environment.
Okay, thank you very much, all of you. I should also take the opportunity to thank all those members of the public who contributed points and suggestions, both in terms of written submissions and also when we undertook a site visit. And also thank those ward members who made contributions in relation to that as well. We did have quite a lot of interest, as you may gather, in relation to this topic, and I think therefore it's timely, and the questionnaire is also timely. So I will invite members now to raise the questions that they have. We did have a pre-agenda meeting, and I'll ask Councillor Nick Haller to start off.
Good morning, everybody. This is a question about relevant paragraph 3.12. Cemeteries are important to individuals and communities for various reasons. There are places for people to bury their loved ones and at their end of their lives to provide a space for peace and remembrance, and reminiscence and reflection for the entire community. Therefore, it is important that cemeteries are well managed and accessible. Are you confident that the accessibility, including the disabled and elderly disabled parking, I'll go back. Are you confident that the accessibility for all, including disabled and elderly disabled parking, has been raised as an issue in Blaenavon, and disabled toilets have apparently been out of order at Luxillin for some time? I apologise for my wording of the other word is I'm English.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Hawler. I'll hand you across to Rebecca to cover that, as she's far more familiar with the practical workings and the issues of access in the cemeteries. So I'll hand over to Rebecca and then pick up after she's had the opportunity to answer.
Thank you, Councillor Hawler. So the difficulty with accessibility, the cemeteries are accessible, but for people to access the cemeteries, but it might not be necessarily accessible to access all the graves within the cemeteries because of the terrain that you have to walk over to get there and the layout of them. So the cemeteries themselves are accessible. There isn't any disabled parking within Blaenavon Cemetery, but you can park along the side of the cemetery section. But actually being able to access, for anybody that has a disability, it may be difficult to access their particular graves depending on where they are in the section.
Can I ask if any follow-up on that from any members? Nick?
Yeah, there's obviously an element of disabled people that do visit the cemeteries. Is it possible to identify those disabled people to give them better access to their loved ones?
It's something that we can discuss if there's people that need that consideration. It's before a burial, there's something we could take in account where we place the grave. So if we're informed before a burial that there's a close family member that has difficulties with walking and things like that, then potentially we could put the grave in a location that they could either access more or at least see easier from the road. So afterwards, it's hard, obviously, to do that because the grave will be where it is. But beforehand, I know at Llewellyn it's something that we've done frequently. But yeah, if it's told to us beforehand, then we can take that into consideration when we're allocating a grave.
I take on board what you say, but there are people that use Blaenavon that are disabled that do want access to the loved ones after the burial. Again, can I ask that we have a look at a facility to find, or even put some question out within a questionnaire to ask if they need that access to that? I'm aware of a couple of couples that do have access issues, and I think it's wrong that we can't give those people that access after the funeral. Thank you.
Okay. I think you've outlined some of the difficulties there. I think what Councillor Hawler is suggesting is that maybe this is something that could be included about access within the questionnaire. So hopefully it can be captured in that way. Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll move on to... oh, it's me now.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just come in on Councillor Hawler's point? The section about the disabled toilet in Llewellyn hasn't been answered.
I was going to mention that, but yes, please go ahead. Thank you, Councillor Hames.
Apologies for that. Can I just clarify, we were saying the disabled toilet wasn't open at Llewellyn Cemetery?
If I can come in, yes, yeah. It was mentioned to us that it had been out of order for some time, or not accessible for some time. You may be able to clarify that because this was one of the issues that came from the site visit.
Yes, the toilet should be open. They opened when the cemetery is opened at the moment. If somebody accesses or goes to access it and the door's locked, then they come to the office, and it might have been that it was missed being open on that day. But in general, yeah, the disabled toilet at Llewellyn Cemetery should be open.
Okay, thank you for that. That leads very well, actually, to my next question, which was, again, relating to the site visit. Several members of the public did comment on the difficulty sometimes in contacting officers at the cemetery office or via phone or email. So is there any system in place for contacts when the office is not covered?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. Within the background section of the report, there's information included on the opening times of the office. So when the office is open, then there is a member of staff that should be available for responding to queries or to provide information to users of the cemetery. We also have a dedicated email address for cemetery services and a contact telephone number, and more recently we've also set up a form on the council's website to enable members of the public, stakeholders, to submit queries and inquiries about the service that we provide at the cemeteries in Torfaen. So there's a number of options by which contact can be made. We do accept that perhaps on some occasions there have been issues with manning the cemetery, perhaps due to staff absences, and obviously that is something that we're keen to ensure that there's that continuity of service, and where possible, the office should be open and available to members of the public during the times that's stated on our website. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Rebecca, to that. No.
Thank you. Again, I would make note that this is something that can perhaps be covered within the questionnaire, because you've got a section on information and communication, and we'll go into that in some detail. Can I just check with other colleagues if anybody else? Councillor Haynes?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on the same point, really, 3.3.4, who monitors the reports and checks that the issues that are raised are followed through? Is there someone that sort of oversees that system? Because and whether that's the new reporting system or telephone or emails. I'm wondering if you've got an idea of the level of complaints that we've had over the last 6 to 12 months as well.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Haynes. This is something that is a work in progress. So primarily where we have been up until now is that complaints are received via, and inquiries are received via the dedicated mailbox. Obviously, they can also come in to us in person and through other routes. One of the issues that we'd identified as part of our ongoing exercise to review the cemetery services is that there could be improvements in terms of how inquiries and complaints are collated, and work that we do to analyse them, to identify trends. Since we've identified this issue, we have put in place a database of all complaints, and we've gone back over a period of time of 3 years to try to identify what they relate to. That's been quite a manual task, but going forward, we'll be maintaining that as and when complaints come in, and there's a number of layers of management that can have oversight and scrutiny of what it is that we're seeing. So ultimately, responsibility for cemetery service management is with Rebecca, and then Louise has responsibility for oversight over that. And we've introduced a number of check forms as well. So we've introduced a recent inspection form, so that there is that monitoring taking place of service standards and issues that might have come to our attention. So it's fair to say this is a work in progress, but we are looking to put in place improved systems to deal with these issues.
I'm sorry, just to come back on that, Chair, is it just one member of staff that deals with the email logs, the in-person logs and the inquiry logs? And is it that same person that's monitoring the effectiveness of the responses?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Haynes, for the lack of clarity on that. So we have a cemeteries registrar. They primarily are the first point of contact to deal with the inquiries. Depends on the nature of the inquiries. It might also be picked up by the cemeteries manager. We also have a cemetery sexton as well, who might be responsible for responding to particular queries. So there's a number of members of staff. Equally, again, depending on the nature of complaints, it has been the case that Louise has needed to play a role in dealing with complaints that have come forward, and equally myself as well, that has oversight for the whole service area. So there are a number of people, and there is scrutiny in place to assess the adequacy of response that are provided. And also, just lastly, just to say that if there are any concerns regarding the level of response that's been provided, or the information that's been provided, the council does have its corporate complaints process, and people are advised that if they are dissatisfied, they can exercise their right to be able to complain via that arrangement.
Okay, thanks. And the second part of my question is do you have an idea of how many complaints we've had over a set period? I know you said that you are looking back to the 3 years, but is there any sort of data on sort of the last 6 months or the last 12 years, or is there? I know earlier in the meeting you said there seems to be an increase in, but I'm wondering what the level of those are, whether it's 1 a month, 12 a month, 100 a month, you know?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Haynes. Under section 4.8.3 of the report, there's a table which details the number and type of inquiries and complaints that the Cemetery Service has received over the last 3 years. So what you will note from that, there's a number of columns included relating to whether they're complaints about staff, whether they're complaints about conditions of the cemeteries, and whether they're complaints about practices. So that provides a bit of a breakdown, but we are conscious with the improvements that we need to make with capturing details of inquiries and complaints. We would like to be better able to break them down further so that we can properly identify issues and trends over time as well. So, yeah, thank you for your question. And also with the questionnaire, we're hoping that we can extract some further information around people's experiences and views of cemeteries as well, which will inform service improvements going forward.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Haynes?
That's lovely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'll move on then to next question. This is from Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chairman. The report confirms that a toilet is open to the public at Llwyn-Celyn. However, this is not the case at other Torfaen cemeteries. Are there any plans to review this issue, particularly considering the elderly and young children who may attend the cemeteries? Also, Panteg has a chapel currently in use, which many people would expect to find a public toilet on the site, especially the mourners who have had to travel long distances to get there.
Thank you for that question. At the moment, the only toilets are at Llwyn-Celyn Cemetery. Historically, there were toilet facilities at Panteg Cemetery, but about 10 years ago, they were closed due to subsidence. It was deemed that with the move to Llwyn-Celyn Cemetery and the reasoning at the time, I'm not privy to them at the moment. I don't have all the details about the reasoning, but the main one was that there was subsidence, that the toilets were then closed. And as far as I'm aware, there were never toilets at Blenavon or Cwmbran Cemetery. At the moment, as far as where I've not been including discussions about putting any toilets in place. For that, whilst we understand that obviously it is difficult with people having travelled long distances, there is no legal requirement for there to be toilets at cemeteries. And I think that in general in cemeteries, as they're going on now, is being taken more into consideration, and toilets aren't being provided like they were historically.
Just to add to that response as well, the Council is responsible for implementing a public toilet strategy and for identifying toilet facilities throughout the local authority area. And perhaps it might be the case for us to be able to publicise the work that we've done better and where there is the nearest local toilet to those cemeteries, so that people can can access a toilet should they need to. So perhaps that is something that we'll need to take forward. And also, you know, as part of the feedback within the questionnaire, we're seeking responses around sort of facilities in the cemeteries. So it'll be interesting to see if that is something that is raised as well. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to see this issue added to the public consultation, because I know it is a problem with lots of people.
I think that's a fair point, Councillor Parish. I think we're seeing nods here. I think that definitely should be included. So, thank you for that. And thank you also, Rebecca, for the background. You know, obviously it's been quite a long time, but we're seeing more people, as you say, raising some of these points. I'll move on now to question for Councillor Horler.
Over the few months, we've been discussing with many about the cemeteries on access, and this is about at several cemeteries sheep have accessed them, that they're causing damage and vandalism that's also occurred. How would this be managed on going forward? I know this is a subject that is because we live on a mountain, but there are times during the year that we do get a lot of sheep within Blaenavon Cemetery and other cemeteries that do cause disruption. We do have a network of farmers that do come and locate them, but there is issues about the perimeter fences. We've currently had the gates, the sheep gate emptied, but the simple fact is that at the start of the year, this year, I had a lot of complaints from residents who were getting sheep, having sheep on their gravesides and destroying what they had around it, and there was never an easy resolve to be able to resolve it, if that makes sense.
Thank you for that. And just to say, we'd had this mentioned at Llyn as well, that sheep had got in at one point.
Thank you, Councillor Horler. I'll hand across to Rebecca just to give some context in terms of the extent of the issues that we are aware. We are aware of sheep gaining access to a number of cemeteries, and then I'll pick up after then, if that's okay.
Thank you, Councillor Horler. With regards to Blaenavon Cemetery, we have been doing checks on the boundary fences, and there's been a couple of places where we're going to be carrying out some work to make sure that the fence is secure. There's been suggestion there's been a gate that's being left open occasionally. So that's again something that we'll look to do to make sure that all gates are from the cycle path are closed in case they're getting in that way. We've also been told that the sheep might be jumping over the grid that's in the entranceway. So that is something that we'd need to look. If that's the case, then it might be that we need to look at getting a bigger grid or a different style. The one that's there at the moment, from my understanding, it was donated to the cemetery quite a number of years ago, but it's flat, and the suggestion has been like a rounded one might be a bit better. So that is something, obviously, that we can look into and put in as an idea of an improvement to the cemetery, is potentially a bigger, maybe a bit wider and a different style cattle grid. If they are jumping over it, I've been told they've been seen to jump over it and walk over it. So that is something, obviously, that we can take down as an improvement for Blaenavon Cemetery. There has been some sheep in Lewin Celyn Cemetery recently. They've been, the community farm has been using some of the surrounding fields for sheep, to put their sheep there. They have improved the security of the fencing around there, and since they've done that, we haven't recently, since their last call out, I think was last week, we haven't had them out again. If we do, then obviously we feed that back to the community farm, and they get up there quite quickly to try to sort it out. As far as I'm aware, that might have been resolved, but obviously if it does happen again, that's something we can feed back. And if it turns out that they can't use the field, then obviously that's something they'll have to look for somewhere else to put them. But as far as I'm aware, they have increased the security on it, and hopefully the sheep will be safely in there now.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add to what Rebecca said, we do maintain a record of local farmers. So if we become aware of sheep straying in the cemeteries or on public land for that matter, we will make attempts to contact farmers so that they can come and collect the animals to prevent them from causing damage. Because clearly if they get into public areas, there's a potential for them to cause accidents if they're on the highway, as an example. So we do maintain that list and keep it as up to date as possible. We're not aware that this is a significant issue, but we are aware of instances where sheep have gained access and they have unfortunately caused damage to the floral arrangements on graves and so on. And we do appreciate that can be distressing for families. So we are looking at steps proactively to prevent sheep from gaining access, and perhaps there's also something that we can do in terms of that ongoing dialogue with the farmers as well, so that we can resolve issues as soon as they arise as quickly as possible to prevent more damage from being caused.
I think that's very helpful.
Whilst I agree that it's not a significant issue, there are times when I have many conversations with local residents that have got loved ones within the cemetery. And then it becomes a significant issue, not only to the sheep, to the welfare of the sheep, but it also comes to the significant issue around the residents' welfare of their loved ones that are there. So I accept, thank you.
Thank you for the responses. I think it's helpful that you're conscious of the issue and that there are some steps being taken in relation to that. I'll move us on. It's Councillor Haller again, and I'm sure he'll have a very brief question for you now.
Okay. So, there is currently no documentation schedule to maintenance and activities in cemeteries. Operatives typically spend a week in each cemetery on a rotational basis. Would it be beneficial to have a management plan in place which includes the inspection of graves, the uncertainty of the need to topping up graves, and for the managing of complaints received regarding the location and the anaesthetics issues around the tip-off areas?
I'm not sure what's happened here. Is it working? Yeah. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Haller. It is something that we have acknowledged ourselves, that there needs to be a more robust management protocol in place to sort of direct operatives' activities across the cemeteries and target our resource in the best way where there is that need. So that is something that we are looking to work up. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that, Rebecca, in terms of working arrangements. No, do you? Yeah. So it is something that we are mindful of. The consultation will hopefully help us as well to focus our efforts on the areas where members of the public are identifying particular problems. We have recently introduced an inspection checklist as well, so the sexton is undertaking regular inspections to be able to identify issues at the cemetery and take corrective action as soon as possible to address those. And this checklist then also sort of features in terms of the previous point that you raised, so that if we're identifying issues with boundary fencing, for example, or gates being left open, that we can take quick corrective action to resolve that. So it is a working process in terms of our procedures and systems, and it's fair to say we do acknowledge the need for improvement in this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to bring in Councillor Clarkson, who has a hand up, and then Councillor Haynes. Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's going back to the point about sheep. Some people might not think it relevant, but there is a welfare issue with the type of cattle grid used, specifically with the rounded ones and the ones that spin when you step on them. So it's something that would need to be consulted with the local commoners and farmers. I would suggest it's nothing more distressing than trying to access the cemetery and there's a sheep that's fallen into a cattle grid and injured themselves. So that is something that needs to be consulted on and considered prior to any alteration conditions. And it may be a case, I often get contact from people, as Councillor Hall has said, that sheep are in there, up in Blenavon Cemetery, but people don't know how to report this. So it may be that something needs to go onto the website just to outline and explain that, and we can possibly do a small amount of comms on it, some information so that people are aware of how to report. Thanks, that's all I wanted to raise on that issue.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And Councillor Haynes?
Yeah, mine is a little bit back in the agenda as well, 4.2, the ICCM Charter for the Bereaved. I know that it states that this is a self-assessment, but are there any sort of intermittent checks by the ICCM? And also, is there a cost involved with being involved with them?
Thank you, Councillor Haynes. The ICCM can do spot checks as they see fit, so we submit it once a year, and they might pick a selection of areas to check up on or follow up on. Some of the stuff is about our website, and stuff is how we deal with inquiries. So they could do blind checks, or they could arrange to come and see the facilities. So that is something that the ICCM do. They don't do it to all the authorities every year, but that's something we're aware of. They could just turn up and do it at any point. There is a cost for it to be part of the Charter for the Bereaved, and I don't think I have that cost on hand. Joe is currently trying to find it on the database, but yeah, there is a cost for it. Bear with me a second, we might have it.
Do you know when our last spot check was made? I mean, I'm assuming they're very few and far between, but in your time with that department, are you aware of any spot checks?
I'm not aware of there having been any. I've been here 5 years now, and as far as I'm aware, there haven't been. But also, unless there was an issue with it, they might not contact us. It might just be something that they do and feedback if there is an issue. And also members of the public can contact the ICCM if they have an issue with a cemetery as well. So they would then follow up anything they got if it was raised with them that a cemetery wasn't up to standard or saying they were doing something in the charter that we aren't. Then the ICCM could then contact us and get clarification on that. Do you want to talk?
Yes, please.
Just on the cost, members, there's two parts to the annual cost. The first part is the best value assessment process and membership of the Charter for the Bereaved scheme, and the second part is the Bereaved scheme itself, and a total of £755 a year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Great.
Sorry, just to lastly add to that point, as part of our review process as well, we could also look to make contact with the ICCM to see if they will look to undertake an independent assessment as part of our membership arrangement as well. So it is something that we could seek their support in doing.
That sounds a very positive step to take. So I think I'm seeing nods from colleagues here. I'm conscious we've still got quite a few questions to answer. So can I ask members to be fairly concise? I'll move on to Councillor Clarkson now.
Councillor Williams, can I just come in, sorry, on that last point?
Thank you.
And just very quickly, in addition to going back to the ICCM, I think it's worth thinking about, now we've got the new robust inspection and the inspection checklist. Hopefully the SEX can do those ad hoc as well, sort of, just as and when needed, and then that will help us as well with our conditions.
Thank you, and I should say that we spoke to the sexton on our site visit, and that was made clear to us. So, that's helpful. Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. This is around 4.46 of the report. I personally get an increase in complaints and comments around significant annual events where visitors' numbers are increased. So I'd like to ask, are significant annual events factored into the grass cutting regime, such as Father's Day, Mother's Day, that type of day, when the grass is growing quite rapidly often, and when more service users are expected to attend the cemeteries? Should we be exploring how grass cutting regimes can be altered to take these days into consideration. And also there's just the issue of what happens once the grass has been cut. I've received complaints of grass just being left lying, so it's very difficult to walk through, and sort of hinders access to grave sites again. And there is an issue with sort of our carbon footprint of whether we take grass away or move it onto another part of the site. So apologies, there's two parts to that question.
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. In terms of the times when we cut grass, and particularly if we factor in special times of the year where people are more inclined to visit the cemetery, that is something that we do have regard to. We operate our grass cutting schedule on a 15-day cycle, but we do sort of have to acknowledge that sometimes weather conditions can interfere with the arrangements that we've put in place. Some of the improvements that we're looking to introduce going forward is to try to publicise our grass cutting schedule so that members of the public can have an understanding as to when grass is due to be cut. Some improvements that we have made recently as well is that if there is a particular issue with grass having grown long because, for example, the rainy conditions over the summer, we can look to flex our resources and use other services within the council to support our grass cutting regimes, and that's something that we have done recently as well. So this is an area of challenge for many local authorities in terms of cemeteries management, but there are opportunities I think we can take to make improvements to our arrangements, and publishing the schedules is definitely a step forward, I see. And flexing our resources to make sure that the teams support one another in the activities that they're involved in. There was also a question in relation to the leaving of the cuttings as well, and as you said, that there are big sort of resource implications associated with having to remove the cuttings, and that is something that we wouldn't be in a position to be able to do with our current level of resources. What I would say is that when the grass cutting happens over a number of cycles, what we will naturally get is that those cuttings breaking down over time and dispersing as well as the area is mowed over that period of 15 days. So it should dissipate and it should alleviate any potential issues that could arise. But particularly after the first cut, we do appreciate that sometimes it can appear a little unsightly, and it can cause accumulations of some cuttings. So we will be looking at how best we can disperse those.
Okay, Councillor Clarkson, anything further?
Yeah, it's an issue that comes up as well when we have to call other teams in because the grass cutting's got behind and the grass has grown very long, and it can cause significant access problems for people with less sort of mobility issues. So if it could be looked at that we can flex in response to the actual conditions on the ground and how to deal with them when they do arise and difficulties are experienced. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haller, I think we have a couple of questions from yourself.
We have a couple of questions now. So this is about 4.5.4. Some of the spoil used on graves contains large pieces of rock, which can cause upset to and offence to families. Does TBC have the facilities to sift off the site, which in turn would be allowed the spoil to be settled easier on the lawn process on the top? And put another point into this. Currently, we have a facility down at New Inn which is offering free compost to the general public. Is there any way that we could mix that topsoil and sift it with some of that compost to make it more presentable to the public instead of looking at rocks on top of the graves?
Thank you, Councillor Hall, for the question. Apologies, obviously the landscape up in Blanavon is quite rocky. There are quite large rocks and boulders that come out of the ground, unfortunately. In terms of relocating the soil and use it, we've actually had a discussion about if that would be an option. But when we take the soil out of the ground, it is deemed as waste, and we can't actually use it elsewhere. So we have to manage it on site, essentially, or between the sites. So that's why we have the tip-off areas, unfortunately, because we can't utilise it elsewhere.
I think you have another question.
Have you engaged with other parts of the council in order to respond to issues caused by poor drainage and diggers, as some grave areas are very boggy and unsightly, and we've obviously had conversations recently about this?
Thank you, Councillor Hawler. I know there has been some issues, drainage in particular in Panteg, that has been looked into, and we have been liaising with property colleagues to try and resolve those. Can you add any more, Rebecca? I think we've sort of worked our way through those, haven't we? And yeah, and they are being resolved, aren't they? Obviously, with regards to Blenavon, it is an issue, again, because of the landscape. The water does pool and run downhill, but it is an issue that the teams do try to manage and, act on as and when.
So my next question. Some of the ward members and members of the public stated that permanent signage was needed on slippery and uneven areas, damaged graves, etc., to warn people of risk. There's also signage that no longer visible. As it's faded away, can officers explore appropriate signage in cemeteries? And one of those signages, obviously, we talked earlier about the entrance to the Vartek Cemetery from the bicycle from the bicycle path. There is no signage down there. Please shut the gate. And we were talking about this earlier, and we've had other signage put on it. It's disappeared. We've also had the door removed at one stage, as you were aware, the gate. So.
Again, thank you, Councillor Hall, for your question. As Dan has mentioned previously, as part of this review, each cemetery has now got an action plan in place, and signage is key to all of those cemeteries. And it is something that we're looking at to get updated for the signage across all of our cemeteries. We're also aware we need some maybe interpretation panels as well in certain cemeteries, so it is on our action list to work through.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
My final question on this level. What level of training do cemetery staff undertake in terms of engaging with the public, and what process regarding individual members of staff following any complaints about their behaviour and actions?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hawler. So the cemetery operatives in particular, they carry out training for their job, which is cemetery operatives training, which covers all aspects of the preparing the grave and carrying out the funeral side of it. With regards to training and stuff dealing with members of the public, we haven't got any training in place for that at the moment. It is something that obviously we look at because it is important. They are the front line. A lot of the time they'll be out working when people will approach them, and it is important, obviously, that they are comfortable with how to appropriately deal with that. So it's always been done in the past through basically just on-job training about what to say to people, to advise them to contact the office and things like that, but to give them, if they are more frequently becoming the first contact with people approaching them, additional training, or giving them the facilities to properly direct people to us. For myself or my colleague at the cemetery registrar, so that they can be dealt with appropriately and their questions answered. That is something obviously we can look to improve on and increase.
I'd just like to add that as part of our membership with ICCM, obviously there are training opportunities through that body. So again, that's something we can look to explore, in addition to the spot checks.
Okay. Sorry, Nick. Yep.
Just a supplementary on that one. We've had discussions in the last couple of months about the closeness of operatives during funerals and how close they are to them. You've had a complaint over the weekend about an action that happened within Vartek Cemetery. What is the policy about the operatives waiting to backfill those those burial plots, and how far distant should they be away from that meeting? Sorry, my words are not coming out very well tonight.
You know the context.
Thank you, Councillor Hawler. Yes. So from the operatives, they need to be they need to be able to see what's going on around the grave because they are responsible to make sure that the coffin is placed correctly and lowered correctly into the grave. So they need to be in the area. Now, once the coffin is in the grave, then they can take a further step back. They have to be around in case there's any issues they need to resolve or in case the funeral director requires them. But once the coffin is in the grave, then they can remove themselves a bit further away. But until the coffin is placed in the grave, they do need to be closer because they need to ensure that it's all carried out correctly. And obviously there are hazards involved with lowering the coffin, so they have to be around for that. I know we discussed this about this particular situation. There isn't a standard that they're told they have to be a certain distance away, but they are told to sort of make themselves less seen when they're able to allow families to obviously and friends to carry out their service as they would like to.
I think that's fairly clear. Yep, thank you. I think again that may be one of those things in terms of the questionnaire to include the about sort of if there's any feedback of people's experience around funerals, etc. I'll move on. I think this has been partly asked, Councillor Clarkson. I'll give you the opportunity if you want to reinforce it or add to it.
Yes, please, if I could. When I was looking at Appendix 1 and the International Charter for the Bereaved, it seemed to say that the training that they were suggested hadn't been undertaken by staff. So I just wondered if that was something that we would be considering sending staff on. Is that suggested, recognised training outlined in that charter?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, that's something we can certainly explore and look at.
That's helpful, thank you. I'll move on to Councillor Evans.
That's already been asked, Chair, but I've got another question I would like to ask.
Please go ahead.
What are we doing to inform the residents when they have to travel by public transport or actually walk to the necessary cemeteries? Are we signposting the safe routes?
Thank you, Councillor Evans. We don't currently have any sort of signposting or information on safe routes to cemeteries if people are travelling via public transport. We do recognise that people could travel to the cemeteries through various means, whether that on foot, on cycle, bicycle, and other methods as well. So that isn't something that we've given some thought to, but perhaps it is something as well that we could pick up on the questionnaire as well and ask how people travelled to the cemetery and perhaps whether there were anything that they need to flag and bring to our attention in that respect. So thank you.
Thank you for that.
I think that's a very helpful question, and I think definitely something we'd want to suggest is included within the questionnaire. So I think it's building up some of those points now, which is good. Councillor Clarkson, I don't know if you want to add anything. Oh, and Councillor Owen, would you like to come in now? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether it's a possibility we could signpost links on the website, when you've got the details of the cemeteries of local bus routes or links to Stagecoach or something like that, which could answer some of the queries from residents.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, it's looking at 4.84, and it's around complaints again. It's already been highlighted that more recently mechanisms have been put in place to gather those complaints. But the question I'd like to ask is, once they're recorded, how can we constructively use them to ensure that we've got some benchmarks to look at assessing how well things are going and future improvements, and how would that information be fed back to members so that we can comment on that? I think it's important if we've got a complaints mechanism and we're receiving complaints that we use those to improve services going forward and that members are involved.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clarkson. So the intention is going forward to analyse the complaint information that we receive and then to be able to identify trends as to where we might need to target particular resources if certain issues keep cropping up. I think within the report we've also explained that by issuing this public consultation questionnaire, that is also providing us a way of benchmarking. So based on the feedback that we receive on the first attempt of sort of launching this, if we do subsequent questionnaires as well, that way we'll be eliciting feedback and views and experiences from the public on an ongoing basis, and we can track how our performance fares then over a period of time. Very, very conscious that you know, sometimes looking at just complaint data could be the tip of the iceberg, because you're only actually having access to the information from those that are inclined to complain. And there's a lot of people that might wish to express a view and experience that might not be inclined to complain to the authority as well. But also, you know, complaints in some respects flag up issues as well, and sometimes don't necessarily provide you the rounded picture on the level of service that's provided. So whilst complaint information is very, very important, it's also important for us to have that broader context as well and understand some of the positive experiences that members of the public have and how we can build on those as well. So, you know, I think we need to sort of look at this in terms of analysing complaint information, inquiries and compliments, and then also look to see how this questionnaire also can support that to make future improvements to the service. But one of the things that we haven't sort of mentioned as well is the financial constraints. All of this needs to be sort of considered in the sort of current economic climate that we're in as a local authority as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Clarkson, do you want to?
Yeah, just to add to that, social media seems to be an area that we get a lot of these comments and complaints and compliments from. So it may be that monitoring there or asking sort of open questions in that forum might bring forward some information. Plus meeting with members more often, because we do get a lot of contacts about these things. They're not always complaints as such that we need to pass on. There's often just comments that are made. So just some suggestions on how that can be facilitated.
And perhaps if I can offer one observation that's linked to that, you know, potentially I guess there's the opportunity to get any feedback from funeral directors, etc., people who are actually accessing and able to give some comment and perhaps proactively seeking that on occasion. So, yeah. Okay, thank you. We move on now to 4.93 in the report, and Councillor Haller.
This is my last question. Following on from conversations I had with other members, with Rachel Jarrett earlier in the year, which I totally support. In terms of potential use of Friends of Cemeteries groups, what role do you envisage them having, and what limitations would exist in terms of what they could assist with? I think this is a lovely idea. I really want to get the communities involved in the cemeteries. There are people within the cemetery that visit the cemeteries that do want to get involved, but what can they do?
Thank you, Councillor Haller. So I'll hand across to Louise in a little while, but yeah, we have been undertaking quite a piece of work around exploring the various options of involving community groups, Friends of Cemeteries groups, also taking advantage of probation service where they could potentially support some of the work within the cemeteries. Perhaps how we look to engage schools as well and involve schools is something that we will need to give some thought to. We've also made some inquiries in relation to sort of charity groups as well, so particularly how we can look to get bereavement counselling services in to support those that might be in need where they're visiting the cemeteries. So I think we've got to consider the approach that we are looking to take alongside the council's sort of community strategy that is being developed at the moment. In terms of activities that people are able to undertake, you know, that will be very much dependent on those that are coming forward to some extent. Obviously, use of heavy machinery, cutting grass, and any activities where there could be an issue of liability for the local authority, we would have to treat with an element of caution. It is the case that some residents do visit the cemeteries and they bring their own strimmers and hedge cutters, and they undertake their own tasks on their plot of land. So it's fair to say that there's a lot of individuals that take a huge amount of pride in the cemeteries and are willing to contribute and put the effort in. But I think in terms of identifying specific tasks, it'll be very much dependent on the group themselves and what it is that they're looking to achieve. But that will need to be done in consultation and collaboration with those groups. I know that you've been exploring a few other things, Louise. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to echo Dan's comments, we're trying to link in with our community's colleagues on the Community Operating Model project and TVA. We are exploring helping, putting a community or friends of group together. But again, like Dan mentioned, there are health and safety and insurance, public liability issues. So again, it could be quite limited, but it is something that we are looking to explore and take forward.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we felt, and that did come up in comments at the site visits that we undertook. So thank you for that. Good to see that that's going forward, and I'm sure that may be something, again, to feature in the questionnaire in some form. I've got Councillor Haynes wanting to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Not a question. Unfortunately, I have to leave now. I have a meeting with the Veterans Hub that I have to attend, but I have sent in 3 written recommendations to Geraint for the end of the meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haynes, and all the best with your next meeting. I'll move on then to Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is 6.1. Are risks monitored in any way, and is it data available to members regarding this?
Thanks, Councillor Evans. So risks in terms of complaints that could cause reputational damage, I think we've covered that off in quite some detail. Obviously, complaints that come forward to us where there isn't a satisfactory resolution and end up being escalated to corporate complaints, I understand that members have sight of corporate complaint information coming through. In terms of legal compliance, those are areas that the sort of operatives focus on to ensure that they're undertaking their tasks in compliance with the law. And as I mentioned, we've got this arrangement in place for inspections to be undertaken by our sexton to make sure that operatives are working in compliance with the law and risks are being mitigated. And this is a key part of Rebecca's role as the cemeteries manager as well, to have oversight over that. Particularly issues around safety of structures and memorials and so on. So that is picked up as part of inspection regimes as well, and there are mechanisms in place to be able to sort of verify that is taking place. So as an example, with the inspection checklist that we have, the sexton completes that, and all of those are expected to be reviewed by the cemeteries manager and signed off as well. So there are some checks and balances in place in that respect. And, in terms of being able to manage how the public expect to receive a service and their sort of levels to contribute, their levels of experiences, hopefully going forward, this questionnaire will help us to sort of track that and monitor that over time to manage the reputational risks to the authority and to take action if there are particular sort of areas of concern that's identified. So, yeah, it depends on the actual risk that we're talking about, but there are measures in place to address those. We don't have anything within the cemetery service that is particularly elevated to the corporate risk register at the moment, which will hopefully give members some degree of assurance.
Yeah, if I can come back, Chair, it just, us as members, they see some sort of frequency graph to compare on year, whether there's any improvement or whether there's no improvement. It just gives us an overall idea of what's happening. Otherwise, when we make that recommendation, we can't always see the information.
Yeah, that's noted, Councillor Evans. And again, one of the things that we'll work on going forward is performance measures for the council cemetery services as well. And then obviously that will be more visible to the executive member in particular, and obviously to more wider members as well then. Thank you.
I think that's helpful. You okay with that, Councillor Evans? Yep.
Can I just come in very quickly on that, Councillor Williams, just to say that I have regular briefings with our officers, and cemeteries is on the list as well. So we are constantly looking, monitoring, and looking at numbers of complaints, issues, and so I am constantly looking at it as well.
Thank you. That's helpful to be aware of. So, we do still have some questions, even though we've gone through the report, relating to some of the appendices. So I'd like to bring in Councillor Clarkson now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding the bronze standard awarded by the Charter of the Bereaved. It's quite difficult for members to identify how that was achieved and what else could be done to improve the standard and get the silver or gold in future. Obviously, we felt that information would also be useful in sort of self-evaluation going forward to the services that are being provided. So I suppose the question is Torfaen County Borough Council looking to learn from the councils that have achieved higher awards, and are local authorities sharing best practice amongst themselves as to how standards can be improved and maintained in these difficult climates of financial constraints especially?
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. What I'll do is I'll hand you across to Rebecca, because I know that Rebecca's part of a number of liaison forums with colleagues from across Wales, and has also experience in working in other local authorities as well. So, Rebecca, do you want to take that question?
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. Yeah, there are different levels. There's a lot of factors that go into it. A lot of it comes down to resources and the amount of money available to make changes to improvement. So I think it says in the report that the 2 gold stars are Cardiff and Caerphilly. It's just Cardiff, but Caerphilly silver, sorry. So the top one is Cardiff. Obviously, there's a lot of resources going into that. I worked in the Cardiff bereavement services for a number of years, and a lot of what we went then to allow the service there came from funding from the crematorium, because in Cardiff they've got the crematorium and the cemeteries, and they could share the money across both of them. So cemeteries is still losing money, but the crematorium makes more money, more profit from it. So there is then that money to put back into the maintenance, the improvement, and especially at where the crematorium is in Cardiff, there's a lot to go in there to improve that, because it's the cemetery grounds and the crematorium grounds. So the gold standard is really needs a lot of input, continuous input through money and resources of staff to be able to do it. They've got a lot there to improve it and to look for opportunities, whereas you come down to sort of ourselves and we don't have that level of input, that level of income, the resources to actually implement a lot of changes and a lot of improvements. So we do need to look, I think, smaller scale, look at what we can achieve. If there's points that we can achieve to make it better with the resources that we have, or if, get a little bit additional, then we may be able to, we might not even go up to silver, but even if we can improve what we're providing within our bronze, that's still an improvement, even if it doesn't take us up to silver. It's still an improvement.
Yeah, if I could just come back on that. It is all about evaluating and improving services as and where we can, and these things that we're doing from another area, and any input from any outside organisations is obviously valuable. How does Caerphilly manage to attain silver? Have they got anything that we haven't got access to over there?
I'm not aware of the ins and outs of Caerphilly. I know that obviously they're quite large, and they've got the way I think their departments are set up is slightly different. I haven't had a look at I don't know what their scoring is on the Charter for the Bereaved assessment, but I am part of, there is a local bereavement forum, we're all ICCM members, and we have a lot of discussions and we share input. And we share sort of ideas of ways to run things and improve and all that. So, it's always something that we can take on board, and like in a discussion with the other local councils, and, even ask them if there's suggestions or what, get their input into it. And maybe they've got little ideas of what they do to, make those improvements and the better service levels. So it's something we can discuss.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's just probably worth saying as well, going back on the point earlier about us engaging the ICCM and the opportunities for having them undertaking an audit, so to speak, of our cemetery services, and where we can possibly learn from them as well. They'll have experience of a whole host of cemeteries up and down the nation. So there's a real opportunity there. I think one of the other areas that we could look is to try to extract from this self-assessment those areas that we haven't been able to achieve, because I think you're correct in saying the self-assessment is difficult to ascertain where we fall short. So actually trying to extract the particular areas where we haven't achieved the standard will help to give that information to show, you know, where we need to focus to perhaps get the silver or gold standard, if at all that's achievable for us as an authority. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I think so. That's very helpful. And again, I think we would. You're almost certainly going to see some points of recommendation in this area. So, okay, Linda, on to you again.
Yeah, it's an environmental question, really. In light of our county plan and the climate nature emergency, which we're all trying to accommodate and have obligations towards, our cemeteries are obviously incredibly important green spaces and areas where biodiversity can be supported. There's elements where that could be improved. There are some of the sort of cemeteries that could support more biodiversity. So I'm just wondering whether there's a management plan in place or planned to look at how we can support increasing biodiversity through the use of our cemeteries. There's a lot of interest in this type of thing, and there's that distinguish between neat and nature. So we've got areas within the graveyard which would need to be neat for access and for respect for the burials, but we've got other areas where nature, and we could clearly identify those as we do with the meadows currently, that these areas are being left and improved for nature's benefit. So, and there's also the issue that came up again in the Charter for the Bereaved and the report about protecting groundwater from contamination of some of the chemicals which are involved in burials, and whether or not we've got any policy or anything we do to manage that aspect.
Thank you, Councillor Clarkson. With regards to the biodiversity, we do at Lewin Celyn have a natural burial area and a natural scatter area, which is maintained less frequently than the other sections. The grass is cut once a year, and that sort of adds into the biodiversity that side. We have got also area at Blanavon Cemetery and another area at Lewin Celyn Cemetery, which we do only cut and collect once a year. Ideas, like you're completely right, cemeteries are brilliant green spaces that, you know, there is opportunity there to utilise them for that, as alongside obviously as burial areas. And that is something we will keep into our plans going forward and liaise with the relevant officers about that. And your second question, sorry, can you remind me what that was again? I've gone off in my head.
It's a lot of our cemeteries are quite wet. We've already talked about some of the drainage issues. Yes. Contamination from some of the chemicals used in the burial process, and whether or not we've got any policy or protection against that.
Thank you. Yes, so before the cemeteries would have been open to cemeteries, part of what they have to do to get permission for them to be cemeteries is carry out testing of the ground and the water in it and where it flows, and there's lots of details that need to go into that. So before the cemeteries were designated as cemeteries, there would have been checks on that to ensure that anything going, anything buried in the ground wouldn't affect the water supply. So it's part of opening a cemetery, is to carry out checks for that.
And that's not repeated at any stage, as climate change obviously changes the water tables and that type of thing.
It isn't something that it is looked at on a sort of regular basis.
Thanks for that clarification. I think Councillor Hall wanted to add a little point.
Yeah, I think we all want to engage in biodiversity. We want to see green spaces. We want to see nature coming back within it. However, the public's perception of long grass is that we are lazy and we don't have the resources to cut that. This goes back to signage. And we have this issue across the borough in many areas where people see long grass and they see it because we haven't cut it. If we are going to make more sustainable, increase the biodiversity within cemeteries, could we have a look at the signage to tell the public that we have this signage because of the reason why this grass is long is because Joe public look at the situation and they think, well, they haven't cut it because they haven't got the resources to cut it. Thank you.
I think that's a helpful point, and I think you acknowledged some of the points around signage. So let's add that one, as it were, to that point. Councillor Evans.
No, Councillor Clark has got a question before.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Evans. I just wanted to add to what Councillor Hall said. That would be the point of the management plan, to identify where the areas are well kept, maintained, respectful, and what areas are managed for biodiversity. And, you know, it should be quite clear within the management plan and areas signposted effectively. I personally feel that we could do a lot better from a biodiversity point of view in our graveyards, and it would make them more attractive. So it is that balance. Yeah, I just wanted to agree with that.
Thank you for that, and certainly it was evident. We saw a few people on our visit, certainly at Panteg Cemetery, who were taking the opportunity for a nature walk type stroll. So just a bit venture on that. So now I'll move to Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's more on the cemetery fees. Torfaen Borough Council has managed to keep burial fees lower than most councils within Gwent in recent years. Will costings from a wider number of local authorities be explored prior to determining the appropriateness of our future charging? That's the first one.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yes, I think you were in the Resources Cross-Cutting Scrutiny Committee yesterday, where the Council, in particular Rachel Jowett, the Director for Economy and Environment, was talking about fee setting, and the Council's transformation programme, Project Apollo, which is looking at fee setting. So fee setting is looking at how much it costs to deliver a service compared to how much we charge. And as you pointed out, in cemeteries, we've been able to keep the fees low. That was a policy choice through Scrutiny Committee and through our Cabinet members to particularly freeze the fees at the point that COVID hit residents. Lots of reasons underpinning that, obviously, at the time. Those fees have stayed static ever since, and again, conscious policy choice, knowing that the Project Apollo piece of work would allow opinions and input into how that's taken forward. We know that the burial fees don't cover the cost of providing the cemetery service, and Rebecca's just alluded to earlier on how we're in Cardiff, they're able to cross-subsidise the service of cremation versus burial to almost subsidise those two services as a whole, and we don't have that option in this council. However, for 24-25, as part of the budget process, Project Apollo and that transformation programme will be looking at where the fee level should be set and when that's increased or not, and would welcome members today just giving a little bit of input to feed into that, and obviously you will then have a chance to do so through the cross-cutting scrutiny process when you get to look at the mitigations that are put forward by directors into the corporate process.
I think that's very helpful. Do you want to come back, Councillor Evans?
Yeah, I do understand the thing with the cemeteries, because I actually sit on the board and I do see it. So I do see the both sides of that. It's perhaps something that needs to be looked at in the future. But but yes, you know, with the burial fees, when people pass away, sometimes financially they're struggling to pay for the funerals. So I think we've done really well. We've done our residents quite proud with that. So, yeah.
And I think you made some reference, didn't you, in terms of the opportunities policy, in terms of the payment. I can't remember what the scheme is called for those who are in hardship. But again, I think that's something that could be promoted or made more obvious to people. Sorry, I don't know if anyone wants to come back on that one.
Yes, so there's a social fund funeral grant, which is for people who are means tested benefits, and it should cover the basic costs of a funeral, and that's carried out by whoever handles their benefits. But that is something that perhaps we could promote more and make sure that people are aware of it, because there could be people that are missing out on it. So that is something we could signpost more.
I think that could be helpful, colleagues, certainly, yes. And thank you for that, Councillor Evans. You have another question, Councillor Evans?
Yeah, please. The question I got now, how much space remains within our cemeteries, and when are we likely to reach capacity, and do we have a plan for that?
So at the moment, I did do the figures a couple of years ago as to how much space we had remaining in Blenavon Cemetery and Lewin Kellen Cemetery, but I don't have them on hand right now, I'm afraid. I think there was approximately about 20 years left at Blenavon Cemetery, and Lewin Kellen Cemetery, where we're burying at the moment, we do have we are going to be planning to extend to the field next to it. So that is something we're going to be doing over the next few years, because whilst we've got space for our lawn and our meadow burials at Lewin Kellen, we don't have, in the next few years, we will need more space for our cremated remains and our curb set burials. So we do have we will be looking to extend Lewin Kellen Cemetery over the next few years to open up that next field for the provision for additional graves.
Okay. Anything else to add, Councillor Evans?
No, it's just good to have just an idea of what, how much space we've got left, to accommodate these residents. So, yeah.
Just check if Councillor Owen would like to add anything.
No, thank you, David. I think they're covering everything.
Okay. Yeah, I think just perhaps bearing in mind it might be useful to sort of, if we have that information, then we've got an answer to that question just from your last calculation. Yeah. Okay, so the last set of questions relate obviously to the draft questionnaire. So if I open up here, yeah, I think what struck us was that there are quite a lot of sort of closed questions, and I think the risk is very much that you get a lot of ticks and the not so good, and how do you take that forward? So we felt it would be beneficial to ask more open questions within the questionnaire to draw out what is important to service users, and as a way of giving them more opportunities to make suggestions, rather than just to tick box and not leaving further comments. That's a general point. And I think, so for example, looking at the facilities bit, how do you find the standard of graves? How do you rate the presentation of graves? What would you like to see improved, or what is most important to you? So it's that kind of thing. I'm conscious it might be a more detailed discussion, but we're trying to give you a few key points we felt. We felt that some questions within the staff section overlapped and perhaps could be merged, and that maybe there should be a category around policy, because again, that's the opportunity to explain some of the policy, but perhaps asking some of those things, because we were conscious both from the visit and some of the feedback that people were concerned about what perhaps could be left. That's obviously a policy type decision, and maybe asking people's views on that might be helpful. And so yes, as well as maybe sort of information, but linked to information, perhaps communication, because we've touched on quite a few points at this session today that could be included. So it's really, would you like to comment on these first suggestions?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Your feedback is taken on board, and I think there is an opportunity to look at how we can broaden the questionnaire so that there is the opportunity for people to provide a bit more free text. One of the designs of the questionnaire is intended to help us with that setting of the baseline and continually monitoring performance going forward, where we get the benefit from having the tick boxes there. So there does need to be a balance between the tick box approach and having some more free commentary, which we can analyse to get more meaningful sort of information from that. So that's noted and will be taken on board. Thank you for that. And where there's opportunity to merge questions, we will also look at that as well. One of the things that we need to be mindful of is that the longer the questionnaire is, the less likely people are to complete it. So we need to make sure that this is as user-friendly as possible and we can get the maximum level of input into it as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Owen comes in, and I would apologise in advance because I know Councillor Parish has also got some points, and I may have intruded on that a little. Apologies. So, Councillor Owen.
Thank you. It's also, I mean, I take on board, you know, we can't make a questionnaire too long, but we also have to be mindful of the current financial climate that we're in, that, you know, and making it clear, because if you put a questionnaire, what would you like? I can imagine you're going to have a lot of people with ideas coming forward, which are just not achievable because of the finances, the resources. So it's just making it clear as well what we can do and what we can't do.
Noted. If I could ask Councillor Parish, a couple of points you'd like to make.
Thank you, Chair. Would this be an opportunity to revisit Torfaen's policy around what items can be left at headstones and graves, as this is a big issue for some people, and the questionnaire could explore what is deemed appropriate or respectful, etc.?
I'm seeing officers nodding, but would you like to comment?
Thank you, Councillor Parish. Yes, I agree that it's something that we can take consideration and add into it to get the feeling for the cemetery users as what, like you say, what they'd see appropriate, what they would and what they wouldn't see appropriate to be on a grave in the cemeteries. So thank you for that.
I think on this one as well, we just need probably part of the communication piece to be clearer as to why the policies exist as well, and there are certain items that are left in cemeteries that present a particular hazard to users of the cemetery, but also to the operatives as well. So I'm thinking of glass as an example, where people bring glass, and there are other items as well. So perhaps there is a piece of work that we need to do to better explain the policy that we have relating to items left at the cemeteries. Thank you.
Yes, that would be a big help. People would understand. Yes, Right, shall I go on to the next one, Chair? I know you have touched on it.
I think Councillor Hall just wanted to check one point on that.
Okay.
I take on board what you say. I do get the health and safety issues, but modern technology is now moving on in new ways. 30 years ago, you wouldn't have a solar-powered light. You're only getting that. And there are lots of people that are now grieving in a modern way, and one of those reasons is to put a light onto their grave. Could we look at the policy and see if we can make some form of lighting acceptable within the remit of the graves, within the headstones of the graves? I get the fact that we have a health and safety policy, but sometimes it would be good to be able to help those residents grieve in the way that they want to, in the modern way of grieving. And the modern way of grieving now is using a bit of solar. Thank you.
Okay, I think observations made. I don't know if you want to comment on that, but you don't have to, because I think that comes under that policy element. Councillor Parish.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to information and communication, members felt that communication could be improved, for example, such as the policy around the placement of memorial benches or the financial support, I know this has been touched on, available to families in terms of funerals and burials. Would you like to comment on these views?
Yeah, I just think we acknowledge that there is a need to improve communication and information available to the public, and one of the areas of focus as well going forward is a review of our website. So we're currently in the process of reviewing the information on the website, and also what information we provide to funeral directors as well, because they're primarily the main point of contact with many of the family members as well. So you know, that is something that is underway, and we'll be seeking feedback on as part of the consultation as well, as to what further information might be useful on our website.
Yes, thank you.
You okay with that, Councillor Parish? Yep.
Yes, yeah. Benches. Are you still able to put memorial benches around the cemeteries? Because I know that in the past there have been problems.
Thank you, Councillor Parish. Yeah, we do still have a policy around memorial benches, and that is done via our registrar. We can certainly, you know, communicate the information a bit more widely, and certainly put that on the website.
Yeah, thank you.
That would be appreciated. Thank you. Councillor Clarkson?
Yeah, it's another environmental question around biodiversity. Could this be something that was added on to the questionnaire to glean people's attitudes towards how they use the cemeteries, how it could be improved for biodiversity, what areas would they find acceptable? You know, there's a range of questions that we could put in there. It's obviously during site visits that people have very strong opinions regarding biodiversity, and these really are areas where we could make some improvements, but we obviously need to get the public viewpoint on it.
Thanks, Councillor Clarkson. That's noted, and what we'll do is liaise with our ecologist about what might be appropriate questions to include from a cemetery's perspective with regards to biodiversity. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Very helpful. Thank you. You'll be pleased to know this is the last question now. He says. Yeah. This was really just about how the questionnaire will be available, and that it's physically available, not just on the website. This was one of the things that came up from our site visits. But is there scope that it could be perhaps made available at cemeteries in a weatherproof box? Because we're conscious that's where a lot of the service users will be going and wanting to put. So it's really just, again, making that suggestion to you and any comments you might have.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Williams. So we need to ensure that we're sort of reaching the maximum sort of audience, really, to make the best use of what we're intending to do here in gleaning views and experiences. So we'll be relying probably quite heavily on modern technology and social media, but also we'll need to be looking to explore how we can get the questionnaires out, particularly to those that might not have access or be that comfortable with the use of technology. So, for example, looking at how we might be able to administer some questionnaires on site at cemeteries, whether there's any opportunities for drop-in sessions, and whether we do that as part of the libraries, as an example. So also looking at whether we can sort of promote them through the funeral directors as well, and that's a sort of opportunity to capture some views in that way. So yeah, we need to work up an approach to make sure that we get the maximum sort of level of response from all those through a variety of methods.
Thank you. Councillor Hawley, you had a little point on that?
Just a supplementary on it. We're talking about the questionnaire. How long will it be in the public domain, and how long will it take for you to quantify the results on the questionnaire?
Yeah, so we're currently seeking advice from sort of comms colleagues who tend to lead on consultation and questionnaires. The early indication is that it likely should be out there for at least 6 weeks. You know, we don't necessarily see a value in having a consultation for such a long period of time. Then, you know, people put it to one side, they don't end up completing it in a timely manner, and we might actually limit the level of response. So and there's probably quite a big drop-off after a period of time if something is sort of consulted on for too long a period. So early indications are suggesting about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. And then obviously it will depend on the volume of responses as to how long that will take then to analyse that information and make make sense of it, and then devise an action plan then to implement what we're able to implement, and also to communicate how that information has been used and the areas that perhaps we might not be able to take forward for one reason or another, and those areas that we will focus on taking forward will need to be explained to members of the public as well. So in terms of timescales, the period for the consultation is far more easy to give a complete timescale. In terms of next steps, that's a bit more difficult because it'll depend on the sort of volume of responses that we get and the nature of the sort of activities that we get out of that. Thank you.
Fair enough, yeah. Okay, I think that was all the questions. I'll just check if any colleagues have any other points that they would like to raise. I see no hands. If I could make the point that I'm sure the committee would value the opportunity to see the final version of the questionnaire in the light of the discussions and things, and I see nods from officers. I think we'd all see that as being very helpful, colleagues, wouldn't we? So if I could ask for that, that would be great. But if I can thank all the officers for your time and attention and dealing with a very wide range of questions. So I hope it hasn't been too intimidating or awkward, but I think we found it very valuable, colleagues, to hear all your responses. So thank you. And we'll now consider, you're free to go, and we can now consider sort of, if you like, the detail of recommendations. So thank you. And also thank you to Councillor Owen, the exec member, who has been present also.
Can I just say thank you to all the members for their questions. It's been a really good meeting and look forward to receiving your recommendations.
Okay. Okay, so just a reminder to colleagues that the meeting is still in formal proceedings and being webcast, but obviously now is our opportunity to consider sort of recommendations based on what data we've received and the responses to questions. Geraint, perhaps it may be useful to share the things that Councillor Haynes had sent forward so that we understood what was there.
Oh, there we are. Thank you, Chair. I'll just get the recommendations from Councillor Haynes now. The first point that she brought up was that she'd like a recommendation around the issues logged about cemetery services to make sure they're properly checked, as the current process appeared a little vague.
Any comments on that, colleagues?
Yes, if you notice the question I asked, regarding making sure we're having some data.
Yes.
Because clearly we've got no data to compare on any year-on-year improvements or reductions, and I think that's quite important. We know that. Yep. Unless you've got that data, you can't formulate a proper response.
It's the evaluation process, isn't it? If we don't evaluate continuously, we don't move forward with progress.
No, definitely.
So we basically have a recommendation that the sort of data on complaints is analysed, reported on, and data collected for comparative purposes, as you said, Steve.
Yeah.
Yep.
And actioned.
Yeah, and the actions taken. Yep.
Yeah.
I think we can work up a recommendation there. Geraint's scribbling away, but I think it's a relevant one. Everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Right, so next point, members, is that if not already being done, could we put contact details for the ICCM on the Torvine website and on cemetery notice boards so people can see that they can contact them with any issues?
I think that was touched on by officers, and I think we pretty much agreed with that. Everybody happy with that? I think it's quite a very specific recommendation, but very clear.
And I think Nick brought that up about adequate signage, whether it be information signage or directional signage.
Yeah.
It's important to get that signage right.
Yep. But I think I think that was quite a specific one, and it's probably useful, isn't it, both on the website but also on the physical signage at cemeteries, which was a point that we made. So I think we'll just try and tie off these points from Councillor Haynes first, and then I'll give everybody the opportunity, obviously, to bring in the other recommendations.
The final one is one I'm pretty sure we were going to come on to anyway, Chair. It was about, Dan said about the possibility of contacting the ICCM to arrange an independent inspection.
Yeah.
So that was the last one.
Yeah, I think that's well covered. We picked that up, didn't we?
We did. I think an external inspection to help benchmark is going to be really important, and also to sort of show where we could improve. Picks up on your point, Steve. You know, we need to, and I think if it's done independently, that gives it greater credibility. Linda, sorry.
Yeah, just also that we look into make sure that we look into other local authorities into their innovative ideas and how they're managing to maintain their graveyards. Some are doing better than others. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. No. We can learn from the experience of other local authorities. So to make sure that's tied up.
Yeah, and I did sense that there was a willingness to do that from the officers, certainly.
But so. the other part of that, Linda, and you're right what you said there, but also working with the undertakers.
Yeah, exactly.
The reason I say that, because on our cemetery team, they're involved in decision progress, and they come in and give a report. So it's vitally important that we involve them.
Yep. Yeah. Very, very helpful point, Steve. Yes, totally agree. I think we include that within there as well. I think those were the points. Those were just the points that were raised from Councillor Haynes before she left. Okay, so can I open it up then? Any other areas of recommendation that people would like to flag, Linda?
Yeah, I'm going to have my environmental hat on again. I would like to suggest and recommend that we draw up a biodiversity management plan for our cemeteries in collaboration with ecology and street scene, so that we're looking at realistic ways that we can manage the cemeteries to keep the areas that need to be neat, and the areas that can be improved for biodiversity can be improved maybe by a Friends of group. It all links into that, doesn't it?
It does. I think everybody happy with that. It does seem that was something that was also, again, was receptively received. So I think that's a fair recommendation. Okay.
Can I drop another one in while I'm on?
Please fire away. Please fire away.
Training for our staff regarding contact with the public. Again, the officers seemed receptive to that. But it would seem from the comments that have come forward that that's something that needs to be sensitively carried out.
Oh, sorry, I took my phone off, my microphone off for a moment. Okay. Any other points, or I can ask Geraint what points he picked up from our discussions as well?
The only one I got is about having different route maps to get to the cemeteries, like we said about bus travel, cyclists. You know, that needs to be included in the recommendation, because this mostly emphasises car travel.
Yeah, it's accessibility, and it's our county plan again, Steve.
Yeah. You know,
I'll bring in Geraint here.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of wider publication of the safe routes to cemeteries for those who wish to undertake active travel, I didn't know whether you wanted me to put that in with a recommendation, because obviously there was the issue around the public toilet strategy, and Dan said about publicising that, so perhaps they could be merged as
I think that should be covered. That should be covered. Are you all in agreement with that? Because
very much so. I think we need to merge that together.
Okay.
I have an issue for the Vartech Cemetery. The nearest pilot toilet would be at the north of Broad Street, which is over a good mile and a bit away from the cemetery. So there isn't really a local toilet that is open to the public close to the cemetery.
that applies to Panteg as well. So this is an issue that needs to be looked at. How do we, supply, I don't know, porta potty toilets, something at least, maybe. Okay. Who knows?
I was going to say about the toilet. I mean, they say they don't have the money, but I think they ought to work. We ought to offer what the public want, and then they have to work towards it, when the money's there, because, the public will see this consultation, whatever they want to call it, and think, they haven't thought about this, that, or, the other thing. And there's loads of things that we can add to the consultation. I mean, going through, you've said it quite a few times, Chair, things we can add to it.
Maybe it's a consultation part 1 and part 2 that we suggest then.
Maybe,
but I think there's a...
One carried out in the new year.
Yeah, I'm just conscious there was a question, for example, about the standard and cleanliness of the toilets, but the availability is a key factor as well.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think
there's a Welsh Government strategy on toilets as well, isn't there? So maybe there is some funding around that could be looked for.
That's what I was going to suggest, funny enough, Linda. Extra, grant funding.
Yeah, I think the other thing that struck me was that if you have a toilet available as at Panteg, it could be that if you have an active friends group, then they could open it up, close it. Potentially. I know there may be some issues around that, but it did strike me that if you have, there's a difference between there not being one at all, as at Barteg, and there being one at Panteg, but it's just not open. So, Nick, you wanted to make a point?
I think there's a bigger source of confusion about toilets within the cemeteries, is that we have a workforce that visit those cemeteries and they're not provided a toilet facility. And if the workforce is not providing a toilet facility, should we be providing a toilet facility for the workforce that visit those cemeteries?
So there was perhaps an issue of having appropriate facilities for workforce that are also accessible for the public in terms of toilets. Okay, I think we've captured a point there. Any other points? I know
I've got
Nick, Steve, sorry.
Another one.
Yep.
What about having an overall plan for each cemetery?
Yeah.
With the signage, so you know where all the facilities are.
Yeah.
That would probably be more appropriate for each cemetery.
Yeah. I think I think a management plan, but also, as you say, a site plan and information board for each cemetery, detailing the facilities and the layout, etc. Because I think one of the things that we did pick up on our visit was that people weren't always aware of where, if they were coming from distance, where to look. People happy with that? Yep. Thank you, Steve. Linda, you have a hand up. I'll bring you in, Nick. Linda?
I do. I think it came through quite clearly that we're asking for a review of the items that can be left at graveside and clarity and publicity around what would be appropriate and what wouldn't be appropriate. At the moment, we've got quite a blanket, nothing.
Yes.
But,
yes, I think we felt that that was something that would be included in the questionnaire.
Yes.
But I think it would also be important to clarify the existing policy to make sure that information is available. Because if you're going to ask people about the policy, you need to put it in front of them so that they know what the comparison.
The policy at the moment is more or less nothing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Can I say, with a policy, we need to make it simplistic, because sometimes we overcomplicate it and people lose interest, or they tend to dissuade and not read it. So I think we need to make it simplistic.
And I think it's being very clear, as the point was made, why some things aren't, because of there were points we picked up about items having been damaged that have been left on graves at more than one site. Nick, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, this is about the spoilage that we're using in the graveyards. We don't have a policy on how big those stones are that's going to go back into the backfill. Whilst I fully understand that we can't remove that spoilage off the site because then it's a waste management system, could they look at a way to find a way to sift that soil before it went back onto the top of the graves because of the nature of the way that the appearance of those. And the other point is we really want them to move forward to engage with other parts of the council to look at the drainage. I know that they mentioned it in one of the other cemeteries, but they haven't mentioned it about the Vartig Cemetery, and the Vartig Cemetery has a drainage issue that if it carries on in the way it is, it's obviously going to make muddy fields.
So I think there's a recommendation actually that, you know, as they've acknowledged the need to engage with the ecology side, perhaps to engage with other colleagues to look at scope for improving drainage and spoil. Is that a fair point there? I think the other point that is slightly separate, Nick, but was very evident from both the site visits but also comments that came in from some of the ward members, was the unsightly nature of where spoil heaps were. They were very obvious. And in conversation with the sexton, I think he certainly was of the view that there was scope that they could be elsewhere, so they're accessible for the staff, but they're not so unsightly.
Intrusive, yeah.
Yeah. So
but also we could use community and volunteer groups, which will reduce their costs. Yep. Minimal. We can support them in their endeavour to, you know, keep the cemeteries tidy. So
yes. Again, that would have to be part of a biodiversity management plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they would need to be very much supported. I'm not. It needs to be a supplement to voluntary group, yes. Rather than something that you rely on. Is my opinion on it. You know, the council's got the responsibility for the maintenance. A Friends of group would supplement that and help with improvements.
The reason I suggested that, because they did factor in about the cost factor, you know, particularly the way the situation is with public funding at the moment. So that was the reason I brought that in. Yeah.
Agreed. But I think one point that was made was that, picking up on your point, Linda, was that, you know, some clearing back needs to be done first for volunteer groups to be able to continue it. You know, you wouldn't expect them to be hacking down largish trees that have started to grow, for example, at the Cwmbran Cemetery. Nick, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think we need to look at the training aspect of the operatives and where they are and how they're actually... Is there a development plan for those people that are the operatives? Can we have a development plan to engage with those operatives to make it more back of house, not front of house? And also the distance that they are relaying within it. We know for a fact in the last couple of months that we've had funerals where they've been too visible, and a policy on the distance on visibility, because I get the explanation of the visibility was important, but there's visible and there's visible, and the visible is very visible and not so visible. But the ongoing training of staff members to engage with them on a regular basis to help them understand why they...
Would that come under the training suggested for staff on public contact?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think there's a recommendation there then about training for staff around on working with public contact. I think that's the overall part. And obviously, picking up on your point, Steve, that's the opportunity to demonstrate that you're responding to complaints. If there are
yeah.
Yep.
But it all needs to be linked into the nature plan and the green, you know, spaces, because there's a lot of spaces and all within the cemeteries like that. So we need to be, whether it be a volunteer group and with your biodiversity,
to be linked
you know, it needs to be all interlinked.
Yeah. Yep, it's okay. Can we try and keep it to one at a time? That's great. Did you want to come in, Norma, or just sort of? Nope. Okay. Right.
It would be nice if the public could be asked what they would like to see that isn't there now. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let them have just one sentence, you know, to put in, something like that.
Yeah, I think that ties into, you know, asking people what's most important, what's important to them.
That's right.
Like to see because it could be, I think that will give a guide to the service as to the sorts of things to prioritise.
Yes.
You know, can I suggest that perhaps we look through what has come out? All right, quickly, Nick.
Again, it's about drainage, it's about the policy, about the areas that when it's wet and what to do. I've engaged with the officers in the last couple of weeks, and there isn't a clear policy on how they deal with areas that are being made mud because of the areas. I did ask that we potentially could have straw or hay to be put on the ground to make it more easier for people to access their loved ones at the early stages of it. Could we ask a question regarding that policy and how we can actually present the cemetery in a clearer way when we have a lot of rainfall?
Can I cut in on there quickly?
Yeah.
If you're going to put that down, you're going to end up attracting more animals. I know you got sheep there now, but it could end up bringing more, four-legged creatures within the cemetery.
Yes.
I understand your concern, but that will attract more. Yeah.
Okay, I think there's a couple of bits here. I think there's actually a bit about, if there are any facilities to make it easier for people when burials are taking place in very damp conditions, and I think that's your point, Nick, about and afterwards, which is around sort of roll out mats or something like that. But I think there's also the point that you made, Steve, which is actually about, perhaps some of the unintended consequences if you put some stuff down. I'm just thinking how we can phrase this in terms of a recommendation. There's a bit about being clear in terms of informing the public what is and isn't available, but also whether there's some scope to include things that would actually make it a little easier. I'm not sure. I've got Linda, I see you've got a hand up, and then Nick.
Yeah, this may be something that the ICCM could help with. I notice on their charter, some provide gazebos in wet weather. That would be a huge resource issue, but it may be something that they've got suggestions from other cemeteries, and again, the undertakers.
Good point. I think we take that on board, that we actually look at benchmarking. Ask that question. Yeah, you okay, Nick? Did you want to speak?
From my point of view, I think there's an issue right now where, when last week we had a situation where it was very muddy. The person that wanted to visit the grave after the burial couldn't get anywhere near it, and I think we have to have some consideration for those residents that want to get near graves shortly after it. And I get the fact that we've had a deluge of water in the last couple of weeks, and it's been area, but surely there should be some facility of matting or hay or something to be able to offer to the ground in a local burial that's just happened, because people do visit a lot shortly after a funeral. I think it's important that we kind of help them do that grieving process.
Okay, so perhaps there's a recommendation there actually about sort of with making reference to the industry body and the undertakers, whether it could explore what facilities and support might be available or recommended to enable people to access graves in inclement conditions. Something like that? Yep. Okay. Right. I'm conscious of time, and in fact we're almost on time. If I can ask Geraint to quickly look through, we've got a few things as well that were relating to the questionnaire. Geraint.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in terms of recommendations now, we've covered, you've covered everything and more of what I had. I've got a couple of actions. Do you want me to do the actions out of the way first? And then, yes, so there's just two actions. The one was Councillor Evans asked how much space was left, so I think they've said they would provide more detail in terms of that. And then the other one, yourself, Chair, I think, was it yourself who asked for the final version of the questionnaire to be sent to the committee prior to...
Before you go on, I see a couple of hands. Just want to quickly check Norma and then Linda. Did you want to say something quickly?
Yeah, I think you just answered mine, because I was going to ask can the committee see the questionnaire
Oh,
or consultation, you know, before it goes out?
sorry, forgot to turn my microphone on. Yes, we've captured that. Linda?
I'll be very quick. There was something that was mentioned by officers during the meeting that I wasn't aware of, and that's if if families mention or contact prior to an interment, there could be some accommodation of family who have disabilities with the placing of the grave, and how
Yes,
that
good
can
point.
be sort of put forward to families when they're looking at booking. It would be when at the point at which they're booking a burial plot. So whether that information could be offered at that point, it would be difficult to facilitate everyone, but it is a consideration that the officers mentioned.
Good point. Yep. I'll let Geraint carry on going through the points, and colleagues, are you happy that we're capturing these points? We'll write them up and circulate them to you.
Yes, please.
There's just one other issue that I want to raise, and that's about communication between resident and TBC regarding the funerals. There are a lot of people that come to members before they go to get in contact. Can we make TBC more visible so those people can actually go directly to TBC? So the website link, so the inquiry desk is more visible within the process of making it there.
I think the whole issue about sort of contact numbers, ways of making contact, does need to be more visible, because that's clearly a bit of an issue. That was the very first question, I think, one of the very first questions that we asked. So I'll move on to Geraint to run through.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously we'll draft up all the recommendations that we've just gone through, but the one thing that throughout the meeting I was just jotting down, whenever it was mentioned about perhaps that could be placed within the questionnaire part of the consultation. So I just wanted to sort of just check with you how you wanted a recommendation around the questionnaire itself. Because obviously I've jotted down that you wanted question about the accessibility, toilets, safe routes. Mentioned more open questions were needed, and then obviously a couple of questions, or a couple of sections required around policy and communication, biodiversity. So did you just want me to just put like a one-liner around the suggestions and then bullet point each of the suggestions that the committee is?
Yes,
yeah.
I think that would be helpful. A recommendation around questionnaires, bullet points. You're happy with that?
Yeah,
Yes.
that sounds good. Specific for the questionnaire.
And to make it easier for you, Geraint, I don't want to overwork you.
Okay, colleagues, are you happy? We have,
What up?
colleagues, are you happy? We have a good set of recommendations that you're happy that we'll write up and share with you ASAP.
Yes.
Yes. Once circulated, I'm sure we'll all comment on them, Chair.
Yep, I'm sure you will. And can I say thank you very much, everybody. Apologies, we've overrun a little.
No
but
worries.
I will not take the full responsibility for that. It's a co-responsible in terms of the timing, throwing in a few questions. So thank you very much, colleagues. Good meeting. Thanks for all the contributions. There's a couple of things we need to do, which is, of course, the item 6, which is the next meeting report, which is due to be flood risk. The report pro forma has already been agreed with members prior to today's meeting because of the timing, because that's obviously in December, so it's making you sure you're aware of that. The date of the next meeting is the 13th of December, so we'll probably have some other things on our mind as well. And I think we're supposed to do feedback, are we, in relation to this? So I'll pass on to Geraint, because I think the new trend is to get members' feedback straight after a committee meeting.
Yeah, I think.
Does recording go off for that?
I think we need to take recording off for that, yep.